Thank you for watching and welcome to the hunt for the easiest shading process. Now, bear with me. It's not immediately obvious that I should be showing anyone how to shade and color because I suck at shading and coloring. But beautiful, sweet, and beautiful viewer,
Let me give you a little kiss.
don't click away because you have not been clickbait scammed. I promise. The key word is easiest. I'm on the hunt for that easy peasy baby shading process. We begin by delving into comic book cross-hatching style. Color is an obvious nemesis, and so hopefully this process allows us to achieve a decent result without having to stress our tiny mammoth brains over things such as changes in the saturation and hue. Now that muscly manly arm is pretty cool, but when I compare it to cross-hatching artists that I really admire, such as this man, you didn't get it? That's okay, link is in the description. I can't help but be a little bit disappointed. I need to remember consistency of line and contouring of the form are key. So let us move on to some hatching on a full figure. And once we have Dapper Dan here all constructed, I'm going to block in some rough values and then try hatching over the top. This particular drawing was done with the help of some fashion reference and Procreate. And I actually really like how it turned out, but I do have to say that my hatching was completely contrary to the logic of some of the values that I laid down. For instance, the highlight on the pants.
Fist kiss!
Lastly, I'm going to try some hatching on one of these 4 female figures that I drew. Then I can give my super serious and super important verdict on whether or not I think hatching is one of the easiest shading processes. And that looks pretty good. I think that is a significant improvement from where I started to where I finished. Let me know if you agree. A quick analysis of cross-hatching and hatching. So obviously on the plus side, no color is required. And towards the negative side, well, it's bloody difficult. I think this point can be explained best by little mini poet Spence.
If an errant line should stray, your shading is then ruined for the day.
Now that's not 100% true. Spence has apparently never heard of Ctrl-Z, but I will say that it captures the essence of what makes it difficult pretty well. So next up are some various processes for cell shading. And for the first step, I need to pick some colors that work well together. I've selected these colors from a color wheel presenting a complementary color scheme. Where I become confused is in how much variation in saturation and value I'm permitted, if any. We can look at a bunch of variations of the digital process for cell shading. This first one is a simplified version of the process that can be found in this video. Missed it again! Link is in the description. So our light source is coming from the top right. Certainly more top than right. We already have our flat colors, and so next we create an overlay layer. A big choice to make at this stage is what color to use on the overlay layer. I think generally it's recommended to stay pretty consistent, but in this case I went with the skin color for everything except the hair. That lighting's not too good yet, but that's okay. For the shadows we want to use a multiply layer, of course. I'm pretty sure that I started blocking in the shadows with the bright orange color that you can see on her top, but that resulted in oversaturated shadows, so I switched the multiply layer color to the tan from the pants, and I lowered the opacity to 50% so that the value wasn't so dark. Okay, there's no avoiding it any further, the shading has to actually conform to the form. It's cel shading, so I'm not trying to get too particular about each fold, but rather represent the forms in groups. And I can't help but fix some of the non-shading related issues with the eyes, mouth, and hair. My last move is to lower the overall saturation of the blue hair and check my values. They're just okay. I used a similar cel shading process to do these studies. Aww, and look at the blue guy, he loves us. Making a heart with his hands. We love you too, you little cutie. Anyways, the process was basically the same. I had my flat colors layer, I had a multiply layer over the top for the shadows, of course. For the lighting layer, I used a screen layer rather than an overlay layer. And for the extra light, or the extra highlights, I used an add layer. Additionally, I colored the lines to be the darkest version of the mid-tone color. So with cel shading, you do have to pick your colors first, but once that's done, you can achieve lighting, shadows, and midtones relatively easily. And it's great for animation too. It's probably no secret that I really like cel shading. Next, I want to look at soft shading. Psst! Hey, come here. A bit closer. Do you want to know a secret? Soft shading's just cel shading with extra steps. So the same as last time, except for this time I'm starting with the multiply layer. For now I'm using cooler colors, including blue in the shadow. The major difference at this stage is I take the airbrush tool and I soften some of the multiply layer shading. I then do the same on my lighting layer, trying not to soften direct highlights where a nice sharp contrast is required. Now I dip back in again with another multiply layer for extra shadows. And I snuck some extra shading in on the cel shaded lady too. So I wrote myself a reminder here to include a slight gradient on the flat colors. So from here, it's a lot of me fussing about trying to soften the form shadows and sharpen the cast shadows, as well as darken the ocular occlusion in crevices and creases. Here I was experimenting with texture. I accidentally turned the shirt or jacket red and I decided it looked much better. I honestly could have and probably should have stopped here. This was never meant to be some grand masterpiece, nor was it ever going to be one. However, once I got started, I couldn't stop myself from playing around with different lighting and texturing effects and line coloring. So I really liked the overall effect of the jeans and the lighting on the hips. I was less thrilled about the jacket/shirt and the transition from chest to abdomen, which both had problems at the drafting level, meaning I drew the line work poorly. For whatever reason, I put some weird slatted lighting on the character's face. I guess I thought it was a good idea to draw some attention there, but it really doesn't work with the overall lighting scheme. Ultimately, it looks pretty amateur and I probably wouldn't do that again. And finally getting around to fixing some of the structural issues with that shirt and the transitions between forms. I never did get around to fixing the left side of the shirt, however, which looks like she's holding a bunch of deli meats. Okay, so my verdict on soft shading is that it's a lot of extra work. We can actually see just how much extra work it is when we turn the flat colors off. Okay, so for this last one, I just ran out of steam. The plan was to approach it a little more painterly by throwing down some values and then coloring them with overlay or colorize. Then I was going to build it up with brush strokes. But honestly, the video is already getting a little long in the tooth and I'm out of energy. So let's just file this one under wish I could have. And I just want to say, even if you aren't this beautiful donut-wearing mustached cartoon character, I still appreciate you watching this whole video. And I have other videos that should be popping up to the left right now. Oh, very funny. The only video you're not gonna go for.